Welcome back to People Watching. I'm Joe Navarro. Today I'm going to be talking about interviewing. Now, this is a subject that I know a little bit about because that's a lot of what I did in the FBI. And I know that I focused a lot on forensic interviewing, police interviews, and so forth. But all of these things apply to anyone you're talking to, be it your own children, be it in a work environment. When I view interviewing, I see it a little differently than many other people see it. I see it as a process. And by that I mean it starts way before the interview starts. And for me, as I've said many times, interviewing is nothing but effective communication with a purpose. So the first thing we begin with is, you're going to have to do an interview. The question is, what do you hope to achieve? And that's something you have to ask yourself. And it depends on different settings. In a work environment, if you're HR, if you're a parent, if you're a coach, it really is very different. Obviously, in a forensic setting, if you're in police work, you want to satisfy the elements of the crime. And each crime is very specific as to what is required in HR. There may be a different purpose for the interview. And as a parent, or as a teacher, you have that challenge. But the most important thing is way in advance, ask yourself, what is the purpose of this interview? And then prepare for that interview. Preparing means looking at what facts you have and what is the information that you have that may not be factual. That's often useful to have. And then the next big question is, well, where are we going to do this interview? What's the setting? I've had to do many an interview at the front door where the people were not going to let me in any further. Neighbors were watching, children were present, very uncomfortable circumstances. A lot of police officers face that, or during a traffic stop. Or maybe you're lucky enough to do it in an office. I remember being interviewed for a coaching job, and I'll never forget that interview because it was done in a locker room, and people were coming in and changing, showering, all this stuff, and meanwhile the guy responsible for hiring was sitting there with a clipboard and very distracted. I got hired. But setting matters. So ask yourself, where are we going to do this? And obviously, a place that has no distractions is best, and you want to be comfortable. The next thing you definitely need to address is, well, who am I talking to? Is this a child? Is this a teenager? Do their parents need to be here? Is this someone fresh out of college? Is this their first job? Is this a veteran who just came back from any number of wars that we've been involved with? And I may be facing a little bit of PTSD. Am I looking at talking to someone who's been a senior executive and now has been demoted? Where are they from? Are they from this country? Are they from a different culture? If they're from the United States, what culture are they from? We have Vietnamese, we have Italians, we have Cubans, Venezuelans, we have the Irish. All of that factors in for how to communicate, what themes to talk about, what can we use to anchor our conversation that may be relatable. I've often been able to say, well, I came here as a refugee, which I did, and I've often been able to establish rapport with people from other cultures. So who this person is, their age, what if they're elderly? What if they don't speak English very well? What if they've had a medical incident and they're having difficulties, or they're taking drugs. So when people say, well, just go in there and do an interview, it's not that simple. If you're a professional, you have to take all of these things into consideration. I testified in a case where the police officer, unfortunately, refused to consider the age of the individual. And I was called in to testify, and I said, look, I'm looking at a lot of the behaviors that are consistent with not just aging, right? So delayed answers, a lot of pondering thoughts, their lips would quiver. But I said, I'm seeing some behaviors here that we often associate with dementia. And as it turns out, the interview was thrown out because, in fact, this individual was suffering from dementia. The judge ordered it, and it was never taken into consideration. So the person in front of you, or the person that's going to be in front of you, is a huge factor. What words are you going to use with someone who is not very sophisticated, who doesn't know terms of art? Or how do you talk to a 7-year-old or a 9-year-old? So please take that into consideration. So location, the person you're going to talk to, and then comes the big question. How do I start the interview? Well, I always have the same answer. Start by identifying yourself. Let them know who you are. Do it with a nice, calm voice, right? You don't want to come in aggressive ever. You want to create psychological comfort. And you want to convey that you are respectful, that you are trustworthy, and that you want to listen to what they have to say and validate it. Which brings me to something else, is, well, in the interview room, or as we call it, the theater of the interview, where do we sit? Those of you who know me and who have worked with me know that most of my espionage interviews I did in hotel rooms. Why? Because offices often have a chilling effect. And for me, hotel rooms were ideal. Now, these were high-stakes investigations, and I wanted to create psychological comfort. Now, not everybody's going to have that. But you can use your office in such a way to where the person doesn't feel trapped. I often see these videos online of police interviews, and they've got the suspect parked in the corner of the room, and then they're surrounded by police officers, sometimes one, sometimes as many as 3, which I never recommend. 1's good enough. 2 if you really need it. And all that does is contribute to psychological discomfort. So all the behaviors that we're seeing are actually induced by the environment, trapped corner, and the close proximity of the police officers. You want to create psychological comfort. You want the person to sit comfortably. I often say, which chair would you like to sit in? And then, rather than sit directly in front of them, which can be intimidating, it elevates the heart rate, it changes their behavior, I try to sit at an angle which reduces the psychological pressure, creates psychological comfort, enhances memory. I can always sit in front of them, which is more confrontational. But why do that if you don't need to? And then, of course, once you're in a room where there's hopefully no distractions, then you can begin to talk about, well, what's the purpose of this interview? In my cases over the years, I've started with, we're looking for a missing child, to there was an event in Europe, and we understand that you worked at this location, and we're interested in what you know about this or that. There's any number of reasons for the interview, but make sure that you clarify what is the purpose of the interview and what is your focus. Now, if you're going to take notes, please pay attention to this. Take notes about everything that they say. You know, if you're a careful scribe, go ahead and write those things down. What you should not do ever, and I've seen this too many times, is that for instance, the police officer or the detective sits there with a notepad and a pencil and they're listening. And then when the individual being interviewed says something that could be used in court, then they immediately write that down. All that does is have a chilling effect on the individual. And pretty soon they figure out these people are trying to nail me, and it's just been verified by the fact that they're writing down the things that can hurt me. So if you're going to take notes about everything they say. As the interview unveils, and you know what your objective is, be thinking about what they say. You know, I like to start with very open questions. And if it's in a forensic setting, you know, you could say, well, tell me about what happened on the day of July the 16th. And let's see where they begin. What do they mention? Who do they mention? What details do they provide? Or what details do they intentionally not mention? So I look again for the things that they immediately say, how they say it, and then I look for the emotion that is attached to what they say. And then I transition at some point into a more specific, detailed phase. So the first phase is tell me everything you know about July the 15th or May the 17th, whatever it is. And then I say, well, is there anything else you want to tell me? No. Okay. Let me ask you some specific questions. Let's say it's a forensic setting. Then what I do is I don't just gradually ask for more details. I do a really deep dive. I say, so when you came to the door, how did you walk to the door? Did you use the sidewalk to get to the front door? Did you cut across the lawn? Tell me how you did that. What the individual being interviewed soon realizes is that you are a detailed person. So they don't become surprised later on. They know from the very beginning you asked a general question and now you're a very detailed person. And that this is your manner. And this is great because they already are satisfied that you're not focusing on any one thing. This is just the way you are. And then you proceed to ask even more questions. So when you got to the front door, was the door locked or unlocked, or did you have to use a key to get in? And then you sit and you listen to what they say. And of course, the whole time, I'm looking at their body language to see, number one, how do they feel about the question? Are they eager to answer the question? Does it cause a cognitive load? I mean, it's a simple question. Either the door was locked, unlocked, or you had the key. And what are the emotions that are attached to that? But then I continue, right? So they said, no, I checked the door and it was unlocked. And then you say, did you turn the handle to the left or you turned the handle to the right? Now, some of you may say, well, this is a little bit pedantic. It is and it isn't. What it does is it establishes you as a truth and detail seeker rather than a complicity seeker. Complicity seeker is you're just looking for the aha. that satisfaction of the statute. When you're looking for the details, when you're looking for the truth, and it allows you greater latitude, and especially when you go to court and you have to justify why did you ask these questions, this is your methodology. As you proceed, then as a person says, well, then I walked into the house, was the light on or was it off? They may say, well, I don't remember. And then you can say something like, well, take a second and think about it. It was 7 o'clock at night. Do you think the light was on or was it off? And you read their body language. And then if they said, no, it was off and I turned the light on, then you proceed with, well, where was the light switch? And you continue like this. And people ask me, Joe, how is it that interviews lasted 3 and 4 hours? Because of details. Because it's okay for someone to not remember something. But it's another thing when they begin to invent information, or they're troubled by what they have to answer, because now they have to create something that never took place. So it creates a cognitive load. The honest person may come in and say, honestly, I don't remember. All I know is that I was worried about my wife, so I barged into the house and whatever. You can still further break that down. So we're listening, we're observing, we're noting reactions to your very specific questions, and that's key. Reactions to very specific questions. If a simple question causes a cognitive load, there has to be a justification for it. And now comes the one that I used to really like. So when you entered the house, you say that the house was empty. How did you feel about that? Now, what's interesting is that liars often don't think about the sentiment, the emotion that goes with the lie they're saying. And when you ask them sentiment questions, sometimes they can really be very befuddled by it, troubled by it. Or they give an answer that is just incredulous. All right, so you came home, you say you found your wife's body. They probably figured out what to say as what they did next. But what they haven't thought about was, well, how did you feel about it? And oftentimes that question can really throw them for a loop. So these are some of the things that you can do during an interview and even before the interview. Think about who it is, what happened, and something I didn't mention earlier, that when you're dealing with people with other cultures, it may be useful to have, for instance, a translator that is actually very familiar, that can act as a translator to assist with the interview. And you do the interview exactly the same way, only you're working with the translator. Some of the other things that I think about are revisiting some of the things that they say or said earlier on in the interview. So oftentimes I'll let an interview proceed for about an hour, hour and a half. I'll revisit some of the things that the individual said to see if I see the same body reaction that I had previously seen. It's a way of verifying. It's very scientific. If I mention, do you have any money hidden in your house? And the first time I ask that, they say no, but it causes them to compress their lips. If 30 minutes later I ask the same question and it causes that behavior again, then I'm going to be very suspicious as to why. Why does that question? There's nothing wrong with hiding money in your own house, but why the lip compression? And if I see it twice, that's further validation. So as the interview continues, obviously I'm collecting information, I'm collecting the statements that they're making, and at the same time, I'm looking to see, am I satisfying the objective of the interview? Now, I've had people say, you know what, I don't want to talk to you anymore. End of the interview, right? So I haven't satisfied the objective. That doesn't mean I didn't come away with information, such as what they're willing to talk about, not willing to talk about, what their attitude is, what their emotional state is, how they feel about the police, any number of things, even how they communicate. But did I satisfy that objective? No. Did I satisfy other objectives? Sometimes. Sometimes you can recover, you can come back and try to do the interview again, maybe with somebody else. But the initial objective, was it satisfied? And if it is, you continue. Now the other thing to think about is, how do I reward this person when they're coming across with information? And even people who we know they're lying because we have other information, how do we reward them when they're being truthful or they're being helpful? And that's where you have to build a repertoire of behaviors, such as maybe using a little humor, using a break, offering them some coffee or a drink. Moving your chair further away is a way to reward others when they are being productive. The other thing I always think about is, this is not my last interview. A lot of interviewers go in there with the mentality of, this is a one-shot deal. It may be, but that's not for you to decide. But I always go in with the attitude that I want to talk to this individual many times. What can I do to make that experience so good that they're willing to talk to me again? And I've written about this in my book, Louder Than Words, Be Exceptional, and What Everybody is Saying. So be thinking about how to reward others and how to make it such a good experience that they're willing to come back and talk to you. And that was one of my objectives that I always set out, that I wanted it to make it a great experience. This is obviously not a full course, some things for you to think about. Think about the objective, think about who you're going to be interviewing, think about how you're going to proceed, how you're going to reward them, planning for the future, how to collect the facts, how to not make them feel uncomfortable, and provide a good environment through psychological comfort where you can collect effective information. And if you want further training, please come to my website. And I know that I focus a lot on forensic interviewing, police interviews, and so forth, but all of these things apply to anyone you're talking to, be it your own children, be it in a work environment. How do I make them more comfortable? How do I get them to relax? How do I get them to come back and talk to me again and feel comfortable about talking to me, and also satisfying my objective? So I hope you find these things helpful and useful. Please subscribe, please share with others, and I look forward to sharing information with you again. Thank you.